Sup guys? The fleet you see on screen right now has been tested through 50 consecutive runs, of which it dropped 0 one-shots. Raw footage of all 50 runs can be found in the description. I started a bit late, so I did 30, went to sleep, and then did the last 20 the morning after. So it's possible that it actually failed 10 times in a row in the middle, and that's why the recordings are split into 2 parts. Anyway, after having tried a bunch of different fleets, I found that dealing damage is pretty much trivial compared to Vanguard survival for this fight. My main concern was when I ran Eldritch as tank, and she went down with 25 seconds remaining in the battle, and that was with the Eagle Union Elite Damage Control Protocol. It's possible to tank with Z52 and use Eldritch in the middle or rear as well, but Z52 herself doesn't contribute the most damage in this fight among the Vanguard options, and she can still die a bit early, but your Vanguard as a whole would pretty much certainly make it till the end, as you would still have Eldritch left. The only concern with that is not having enough damage near the end of the fight if your Z52 goes down a little early, and then your Vanguard is left with Eldritch with only a single other damage contributing ship. It's probably fine though if your main fleet is strong enough even without fully relying on your Vanguards. So the direction I chose to go with was to experiment with main fleet ships that would raise the consistency of the Vanguard while using Eldritch's tank, because I thought Eldritch just needed a little bit of extra help to be consistent enough. That way, I can maximize the damage of the other 2 Vanguard slots. I actually started by playing around with Zuiho, but that's going a little too far in the other direction, and while the Vanguard was expectedly very stable, the success rate dropped pretty significantly. However, if it's possible to do enough damage with Zuiho and the fleet pulling about 150k, then it should for sure be enough with RAFFAELLO, ultimately leaving me with this fleet. I also want to say that this isn't even necessarily the best possible implementation of this concept of Eldritch tank with a main fleet healer and then 2 damage Vanguards. It's just the first iteration that I tested. If this wasn't good enough, I would have experimented further and potentially found something even better, but this turned out to be good enough. For example, using something like Plymouth and Aurora might be stronger in the Vanguard than Chapayev and Trafalgar, but I'm not really sure because I haven't compared them head to head. As for some of the equipment choices, I wanted RAFFAELLO to fire first to apply her buffs. I could accomplish this by giving her the line gun, but in that case, Alsace would fire after line, as they would both have to use the same guns, and I really wanted to make sure Alsace fired before line, so that line can make use of Alsace's buff, which means Alsace needs to use the line gun. As a result, RAFFAELLO would have to sacrifice one of her auxiliaries for an autoloader while using the Mark 7, which I felt was a worthy trade-off, but I don't have the data to back it up. Then, even though RAFFAELLO fires first, which would make her a good choice to put in the flagship and apply Trafalgar and Eldritch's debuffs before the other 2 battleships fire, I went with Alsace flagship so that her preload salvo would benefit from the debuffs as well. Again, RAFFAELLO's personal damage is sacrificed, and I'm not entirely sure if this is the best option, but it ended up being good enough for me. Her damage might not look very impressive at the end of the battle, but it's thanks to her sacrifices and contributions that the fleet works as well as it does. Also, I didn't use a Pearl tier on Eldritch, as the goal here is to maximize my Vanguard survival for consistent results, so a toolbox was the best option for that. Some details that I observed from the runs are that every single round of attacks from the battleships dealt no less than 20 bars of HP, and this was very consistent thanks to Eldritch's slow, as well as Chapayev and Trafalgar combining for 20% evasion rate reduction. The HP remaining before the last salvos ranged from just under 15 bars to as low as 2 bars, so there weren't any close calls, by which I mean the boss dying as the timer literally hit 0 and shells were still falling down. Eldritch died somewhat prematurely just 1 time out of 50, which I'm showing now, with 4 seconds remaining, but it didn't ruin the run completely. She did also very rarely die with 2 seconds left or so, but at that point, it's pretty much at the exact same time as the boss dying. Chapayev and Trafalgar never died, despite Trafalgar using double Oxytorps in her auxiliaries. Anyway, as a result of this, I think moving Raffaello to the S tier for the Kawakaze meta-specific tier list is warranted, thanks to the stability she brings to the Vanguard over all of the other options. I've also added Chapayev onto my general Vanguard tier list for her insane potential against destroyer enemies. I am also considering adding a new special tier for ships like Chapayev and Aurora that are only good for one very specific thing, because I don't really like seeing them in the same tier as ships like Z-52, but I think that their strengths are so incredibly high that they need to be highlighted and not just shoved into a lower tier. Alright, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.